Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do?
The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
Welcome to another exciting session of the executive. Well, we're not on, Bishop? What's going on?
No, we're on. It's just that I don't have the logo on my shirt. I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. So that everyone won't see me as the oddball. Before you go into the intro, I just want you to know that Sean Foster lives somewhere outside of my city limits, right? I'm gonna go ahead and put this out there.
Listen, I'm gonna address it during my intro. I'm gonna address it.
Okay, someone needs to
address it during the intro. Yeah.
I'm saying what I gotta say. All right.
Hey, can you start us over, David? I'm sorry, man. Start us over.
No, let it run. Let it run.
Let it run.
Let it run. Let it run. Go ahead.
David, what you want to do, David?
Go ahead, Gerald.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the executive session, where we have real, unfiltered conversation. No chaser. We're not worried about hurting anybody's feelings. I mean, we're going to give it to you exactly how we feel. I have with me my esteemed panel of leaders, Dr. Sean Foster, Dr. Baron Davis, Dr. Aaron Bishop, and Dr. Gregory McCoy. Dr. Bishop is a little upset because, as you see, he is the only person on the stream without the Five Brothers and a Mike t-shirt on here today. All right. And so he's feeling some kind of way. First of all, let me pay honor to Sean and his wife for ordering these t-shirts, sending them out to everyone. Bishop put the wrong address.
Oh, no.
And that's why he has not received his.
Bishop didn't pay his money.
No, listen. I put the right address there. Let me tell you what happened. He did not employ the 6888. He needs to go find Charity Adams and even the donkey that they use that Jesus rode into Jerusalem right before they crucified him to get that shirt from Orangeburg all the way to Columbia. I don't know what's going on.
Pastor Bishop, I'm gonna let you tell Tanya Foster that I ain't brave enough to tell her. So you have to write that too.
I mean,
but Bishop,
hold on. Let me finish it now. Barron stays in the same city with me. JR stays in the same city with me. I just don't know what's going on.
They got this. They got a better postman. That's why.
Postman ring twice around.
You talk to your mailman. That's what you talk to.
All right, well, look at Bishop. You're looking smooth nonetheless, brother. You got on your black t-shirt, so you're blending in with the brotherhood. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I think resonates with all of us, since we have all worked in the education space, either as practitioners or in governance. And it is around our expectations for the success of our young people. And there is a narrative out there that we don't have the same level of expectations for young people as maybe we once did. There is a narrative out there that we don't have the level of expectation that would contribute to our young people rising to the highest of levels. And so we're going to have some conversations around whether that is a true narrative or rather that's a false narrative. And so I'm going to start off with my good buddy, Dr. Greg McCord, who I think have some thoughts on this whole concept of having high expectation for every young person that enters our system. Brother McCord.
So, Dr. Green and the rest of you on the panel, it's good to be here and see everybody looking the same except the R&B singer Aaron Bishop. But as it relates to expectations, we had a conversation not long ago, and I said it is my belief that the expectations that we have for our kids are different sometimes than expectations we have for our kids outside of the home. Not us in particular, but as a society, I don't think we hold the same level of expectation for children of color as we do for children of non-color. And then in situations and cases where we do have high expectations, they tend to come from families that look like ours. And I I think more times than many when I have been in buildings, not just buildings where I've worked, but buildings that I've visited in education, a lot of the times I see that coming from people that look like us. I'm not saying it's just us, but I remember when I was growing up, the generation before me, uh, everyone had the idea that they could be something or be somebody. Whereas now we just tend to say, hey, we just want them to get by. We want our kids to get by. I know uh, a conversation held a long time ago is we shouldn't expect our kids to go to college. You know, our kids don't have to go to college to be successful. Well, those expectations were high back then for our kids, or for us, our generation, to graduate high school and go off to college and make something of ourselves. Not saying that that's the only way that that could be done, but that was the way the general rule of thumb is that you go to school, you graduate, you go to college, you continue with your life. I'm not seeing that same type of tenor in and out of the buildings that I visit, nor am I seeing that same type of conversation being held in the communities around me. That's my thought. And again, let me go back and say it's not always people that don't look like us. A lot of times it's coming from people that look just like us.
So, Greg, I have heard that narrative articulated before. I tend not to agree with that narrative.
Which part?
Most certainly, you can find
Which part do you not agree with?
I disagree that we have lower expectations for children today than we did in previous years.
We have lowered the expectations.
And so I'm gonna start this question, Greg. Since you say we have lower expectations than we did in previous years,
we have lower.
Era you're talking about where we had higher expectations.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I didn't live the life of my parents, but the generation where they were fighting for equality, where they were fighting for equal rights, that generation seemed to be more, just from what I've read and from what I've understood and the conversations that I've had, they had higher expectations for this generation, our current generation. Whereas now it seems as if we are lowering the expectations for kids that look like us to just get them by. Whereas before they wanted us, our generation will more than likely do better than our parents. The generation that we're raising and coming behind us, I don't know if that's going to happen because it's almost acceptable for them to be mediocre in a lot of circles, average at best.
Greg, I have challenged people,
and I'm not talking about your kids.
No, I'm not. And once again, I'm not talking about my kids. I'm going at what the data would inform us of. And when I hear people talk about how great things were before, how
I never said they were great.
Expectations were so great. My point is, if you're saying the expectations, let's just say academic success. Let's just because we can talk about expectations across a broad range of spectrum, but I'm gonna just nail it down to just one thing. Do you think that since you were saying that expectations were greater during our parents' generation than they are now, do you think academic outcomes for African American students were better during our parents' generation than they are now?
Again, I can't speak to it with certainty because I didn't live during that era.
Well, we can look at it
I
back.
can tell
You
you,
haven't, you
I can
haven't,
tell, right. Well, I can't
you
look
look
at
at
it
it back.
right now, but I can tell you when I think about the young people that I encounter today, they don't write as well. They don't spell as well. They don't do math as well. And that's concerning to me. How could it be that we were given, such or instilled, it was instilled in us that we needed and had to, and it was expected for us to do. There was no question of what my report card was supposed to look like when I came home. There was no
Greg,
question about the
Greg,
report card was supposed to look like
I'm
for
gonna bring
my kids.
I'm
But I
gonna
can
bring
tell
some
you
others.
as I talk to parents, as I see others around me, that the conversation is not the same, JR.
So Greg, I'm gonna bring some others in on this conversation, but I'm gonna start off by saying this. I'm gonna dispute wholeheartedly what you just said, and I'll
Well, you can
tell
dispute
you
it.
that young people today are more academically successful than they ever have in the history of education.
And you're basing it on what?
And let me. I'm gonna give you several statistics to verify what I'm saying.
Well, see,
I'm
when you
telling
say you're
you.
going to give me statistics,
Well,
then that means
let me give it to you. Okay.
okay.
If you wanna chart literacy rates today are greater than they were during the time when my mother was a child. If you want to talk about high school graduation rates are higher now than during the time when my mother was
So
a
you're
child.
skipping
If you
over
want to
a
talk about
generation or two. You're
what?
skipping over.
Okay, well,
But go
you
ahead.
pick a
Go
generation.
ahead.
Okay,
You
pick my
go ahead.
generation. I'm 55, you 58. I mean, so let's go to
And you're
our
saying they're
generation.
better now than your generation.
Absolutely.
I'd have
Graduation
to see
rates are
that.
better. College attendance rates are better. Literacy rates are better. College graduation rates are better. All
JR,
of those
college
metrics
rates are the
better.
lowest. College rates are some of the lowest they've been in years. Where are you getting this?
What college rates are you talking about, Greg? What college
What
graduation
college rates are you talking about? College attendance rates, college graduation rates. Black women are moving ahead. When you talk about college, are you saying
I'm talking
college
about
rates, college attendance rates are
so if you
better
want to
now
talk,
than they were the generation before this generation?
absolutely.
So JR, I'm gonna say something for Baron jump in there because Baron probably boiling over there. So Greg, I'm agree. Kids today, they don't write as well as as past generations. They don't spell as well as past generations because they got computers. They type and they got spell check. And I say that to say this: I don't think it's a lower expectation; it's a different expectation. Society requires a different skill set now than when your grandma was in school. I mean, so I have to push back on the lower expectations. They're just different because society requires them to be different. When was the last time you went and patched or plugged your tire? You don't. You take it to somebody to do it. You know what I'm saying? When's the last time you sewed a button on a shirt? You don't. They have technologies to do those things. So the expectations are not lower. I believe they're just simply different. And they have to be. Now, have we in some instances allowed a child's circumstance to overshadow their foundational needs? And I say that sometimes we can love children into failure. That's a we can bless his heart syndrome, as opposed to sometimes being tough on that situation. Those situations exist, but I don't think that as a blanket, the expectation for children today is lower. If anything, I believe it's even higher because they have more to deal with in today's society than past generations. So I'm gonna have to sit on JR's side of the fence on this one. They're not lower; they're just different.
Brother Davis, I know you have something you want to share, and then I'm gonna bring Brother Bishop in the conversation relative to this whole conversation around our expectations lower today, and do we need to reevaluate what we expect our young people to be able to do?
No, I think you did a great job of asking the question of how we're looking at expectations in what area. right? So we talking about expectations in academics. So we talking about expectations when it comes to conduct and behavior. We're talking about expectations, what are those expectations we're looking for? And who's the person that's, I guess, applying that expectation to the child. Many of us expect our own kids, and the kids that we've had the fortune of to be their principals or teachers or administrators or just in our communities to be good, kind people, people who are honest, people who are hardworking and trustworthy. Those are some of the basic foundational expectations that we hope that everyone's holding to a high expectation for kids long before they graduate from high school and graduate from college. But when you do look at achievement expectations or accomplishment expectations from different eras, I think around in the 60s, I think graduation rates from high school was like a college was like 3%. And now it's around 20 some odd %. So clearly people are graduating at a higher, blacks are graduating from college at a higher rate than they did back in the 60s. But that doesn't necessarily measure expectation. The expectation isn't something, I don't know how do you measure the expectation, and can you make the leap from an expectation to an actual achievement?
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do?
The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
As evidence that expectations are higher or lower. So those two things don't seem to be, measurable. Like I expect something, but because I expect it, I'm gonna base the level of expectation as being lower or higher based on the actual achievement on someone. Because there are many people who overachieve or achieve more than what some expect of them, right? And I'm sure all of us at some point had some very low expectations placed on us by individuals, and we didn't even know they had low expectations of us.
Even as adults.
I'm sorry.
I said even as adults.
So we surpassed those expectations. So I don't know if people's expectations has anything relevant to do with the actual achievement. But I would agree that I think as a society, and as in particular people of African descent and as black folk, I believe we have just as much or higher expectations of children today than we have had, than it was had for us in the past. I definitely remember folks saying, "Hey, just get a high school diploma." And I'm with you, Greg. I was never one of those people that subscribed to the idea that you didn't have to go to college. I think we've all had this conversation that our goal as leaders of school districts was to prepare you for the best case scenario, the highest possibility. Let you choose what you want to do. But I could never come into the situation saying you are not going to go to, I'm going to prepare you to not go to college. I'm only going to prepare you for a high school diploma. We prepare you for the highest possibility. You just get to decide what you want to do in your life.
Brother Bishop, chime in and add your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, just adding to the conversation, because when we talk about expectations of what we're measuring, we're trying to measure which way is north, right? So I remember in the school district as a chairman, I asked this critical question: are we talking about growth or advancement? Are we talking about growth or advancement? Because growth was dealing with the social opportunities to become a better citizen, right? that you knew how to communicate, you knew how to present yourself, you knew how to think critically, and those soft skills, right? So you measure the north direction, the growth opportunity, and are we better socially? And you have to ask yourself, in a time where everything is done through social media groups, going through group meet conversations, and kids are not talking to each other, is it really an advancement in our social growth? And then again, we talk about advancement in academic achievement. I remember being one of the people who watched A Different World or School Days, and it set my trajectory on the only path forward is for me to go to college. Well, that's not always the best route for every student. And so when we look at what we're talking about as far as lowered expectations, we really need to just define more in this conversation about which way is north.
So
I want to say something just real quickly when you talk about you mentioned Different World, and you mentioned what was the other show you just mentioned?
School Days. You remember we saw School Days?
School Days, yeah. And I just want to pick
How
up
you
on
learning?
that. Yeah, we don't have movies or shows like that anymore for our young people.
No.
Now it's all about, who can shake their booty the hardest, the best, the fastest, who can fight the best, and who can last the longest in the fight. I mean, it's almost as if we've, as I said before, we've turned our back on what we considered to be normal before. Now you hear someone say, "Oh, it's just a different time." It's not a different time. It's almost like
It's a
we
different
just said
world.
we will accept what they have right now, as opposed to holding them to high standards and high expectations at all times. I, I just see it differently, and there's a lot of work to be done in our communities as it relates to how we go about projecting those expectations and what we will and will not accept anymore from young people. So,
Well, Greg, which one is
those,
more important? Which one is more important for our community? Academic advancement or social growth?
so I think the two go hand in hand, Aaron. I think we want to raise good, kind, God-fearing individuals who are smart and intelligent enough that they can provide for themselves and their future families. So I think the two go hand in hand. And I think there was a time my mother raised me, just like I'm sure your parents raised you, to be a good, kind person. Now that's questionable in some circles, but she also raised me to be able to take care of myself. I knew how to iron when I was coming into elementary school. I knew how to wash my own clothes. I knew how to cook my own meals. We just don't have those same expectations for our kids anymore.
How
Sean mentioned plugging a tire. I mean, we did that coming up. We don't expect our kids to do some of the things we did when we were coming up.
So Greg, so when you say that our expectations are lower, are you talking about
Have been lowered, yes.
system? You're talking about the parents. I mean, whose expectations are lower?
Society. I don't think we're doing enough to raise the level of expectation for the generations coming up behind us. I think Sean said it earlier. Things are different. Well, I don't accept that. I reject that. I think in order for us to move or advance, as you said, Bishop, we've got to go back and lift up where these young folks are and take them to higher levels. I just don't see enough people doing that anymore, and especially for kids that look like us.
So Greg, let's just be clear. I mean, to clarify what Sean said earlier. Now, when we were kids, you spent a lot of time learning how to write in cursive. Matter of fact, you used to write all your papers in cursive and turn them in cursive. Well, when Sean said times are different, he is right. Nobody is asking kids to write a paper, a 10-page research paper in cursive anymore. So we are spending time on learning handwriting skills.
How can they do when they got ChatGPT?
Writing papers. Kids are using a word processor. I mean, kids are using technology. So that is going to be different. That doesn't mean it's higher or lower expectations, but no.
And we're not expecting them to do a 10-page paper anymore, JR.
No,
So
no,
if you're talking about, yeah, I mean, you say writing a 10-page paper, there's not an expectation that they write a 10-page paper or chat BT or whatever you just called it, Aaron Bishop. What is it? Chat AI,
GPT, bro.
Chapman Jones,
Greg, But Greg, writing a 10-page paper outside of your dissertation is what's more important, that they get the content and the skill in a 3-page paper, or they write a 10-page paper. So what's the expectation? Is it the length or the quality of content that we're trying to get? It's that old adage when I was in math and I was growing up and I had to do all the odd questions from 1 to 50. And the only reason I had to do the odd ones because the even one was in the answers in the back of the math book. So, I mean, when I could have understood the concept with 10 problems. So is that a lowered expectation or is it just more work? So, I mean, let's not understand that quantity of something doesn't mean I have a high expectation. That just means I'm wasting your time. When I can have something that's shorter and more rewarding to a child or challenging to a child. So it's that old adage, and I think it's a mindset sometimes where if I can do more, then I know more. No. If I'm doing more, I may do more of the same thing. But if I can do
it wrong, I'm not saying that.
Exactly. So I don't think that's a question of lowered expectations.
Yeah,
I think it's more of a question of targeted expectations. JR mentioned earlier, everybody may not go to college. You're right. Everybody may not be built for college. But when my refrigerator broke, I had to pay that man $150 to come out here for 2 minutes.
We all experience
and I ain't made $150 in 2 minutes ever in my career with 4 degrees. So I get it. I think it's targeted expectations for different times, not lowered expectations. What may appear to be lower in quantity may be higher in value.
Well, I'm gonna just keep it in the academic arena. And I've always pushed back on this whole narrative that we are expecting less of our young people today than we did. I will assert that we expect a 3rd grader to be able to do more than a 3rd grader has ever done in the history of education. We expect a 7th grade kid to be able to do more than a 7th grade kid has ever done in the history of education. When I think about what my girls did when they were in 9th grade, and I was a pretty bright kid in school, my girls were doing things that I wasn't even thinking about. My girls did A, B, and BC calculus before they left high school. I had no even thoughts of doing a A, B, and BC calculus by the time I left high school. And I know you said, well, that's just my kids. But I think if we look at what we expect young people to be able to do, I would say that our expectations, particularly in the academic arena, is as high as it has ever been for young people. And so the suggestion that we don't expect the same level that we did before, I just don't think it's false. Now, Barrett, I will concede to you that I don't think you can look at outcomes and necessarily tie it to expectations, because you can have high expectations and outcomes not necessarily correlate to that, because there are lots of things that influence outcomes outside of expectations. You can have high expectations, but if you don't have opportunities, then expectations aren't going to result in outcomes. So I'm not saying it strictly based on outcomes. Let me clarify that. But in terms of what we expect from young people, I think we expect more from young people in the academic arena. Okay. Now I think you might be able to make the argument in some other arenas, but in the academic arena, we expect more of young people than we ever have in the history of education.
That's evident in the fact that even in accountability systems that we have the idea that we expected a child who was born into poverty and experiencing poverty by 3rd grade will perform as well or better than a child who's born in a family of affluence with all types of resources and advantages. The expectation on that child is that whether they have a delayed birth, they're delayed from birth or whatever, but whether they're malnourished because of poverty, the expectation is in 3rd grade, this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous, because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do?
The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, a government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.
And we hold them to the exact same expectation based on that accountability standard without taking into consideration any of those things that may prohibit them from performing at that level. So I agree with you that expectations are as high or higher now in education for a child. We've watched, I tell people that mathematics hadn't changed, but we continue to raise the expectation when it comes to SAT scores and what you are expected to score in the SAT, right? In order to be Palmetto Fellows, things like that. When we saw those particular subgroups like African American students starting to gain and achieve certain things, the expectations then was raised just a little bit higher. So yeah, in education, the expectations continue to be raised on students, and I'm not disagreeing with whether or not expectations aren't or should not be there. But I always say, expectations, with high expectation should come high support. So if I'm expecting you to be this, then I need to make sure that the structures that are in place to support you are there and they are working to make sure that you have the ability to meet those expectations. If not, it's just unrealistic sometimes to place these expectations on a population of students. And we like in leadership, we call them these unfunded mandates. You're expecting us to do all this stuff without the proper support to make it happen. Well, that's the same applies to students in classrooms around the country.
And Baron, just imagine now we have a state law that says that if you aren't reading at a particular level in 3rd grade, that you should be retained. We should keep you back in 3rd grade.
But JR, that is there, but there are also allowances to provide opportunities for a child to get to that level of master, so they don't have to be retained. So you can't just blanket say that. Without saying the rest of it.
So, Greg, let me ask you a question. How many times do you remember 3rd graders being retained in our era?
And I can't really answer that question because
other than their mama, the ones who say their mama kept them back, because you remember we had
we had people get kept back. We had people
their mama kept them back.
But I don't know why they got kept back, but people got kept back when I was growing up. Yeah.
Greg,
and I think they got kept back, possibly just as much, if not more, in certain situations. I don't know, but I know people got kept back.
So, Greg, how does not just Greg, everybody, how does that thought process help students when, on one hand, if you're not reading at this level in 3rd grade, you get retained, but every research article you pull says that for every year a child is retained, there's a greater chance that a child will not graduate from high school.
That's why they give them several more chances to master, to meet proficiency, Sean. You can't just say every 3rd grader is going to be retained if they don't reach this level.
No one said that.
That's not what I said. What I said is there is a mandate in state law that says that if you don't meet certain literacy requirements, you're retained in 3rd grade. That is new. That's not something that has always been in place. That is new. That is a new expectation. So it wasn't as if we came through school and there was some kind of state law that says you don't meet this particular literacy rate, you are retained in third grade. That never was the case when we went in school.
Well, accountability came about somewhere in 2000, 2001 with that Leave No Child
1998.
Behind. Somewhere. 98.
98.
Yeah.
98.
I know it was 20. Okay.
Yeah, Education Accountability Act of 1998. And
There we
so,
go.
which just contributes to my whole point that the expectations of young people are even higher, which is even higher. Let's think about how often we are testing our young people now. Let's say we're giving them inter-course tests in Algebra 1, English 1, English Algebra 1, biology, U.S. history. You taking a pass in social studies, science. You taking a SC Ready.
And so you think because we're
But
testing
Greg,
more,
they got rid of
expectations
BSAP, Greg. They got rid of BSAP.
Wait a minute. You're saying because we test more, that means the expectations are higher? Is that what you're telling me you believe?
That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So Greg,
I don't think we have enough time to argue that because
they
I don't
lowered expectations because
understand.
they got rid of the BSAP test. That's what they did, and that's why they lowered the expectation, right, Greg?
Well,
So
Greg,
what the BSAT test?
They got rid of BSAP, so that's why they lowered the expectation.
Well,
No.
we coming up on the end of the segment. I'll simply ask you this question is before we wrap up. Tell me when we had higher expectations. What era?
They had BSAP, man.
I mean, what era?
BSAP.
Tell me what era? You and I went to school in the 70s and the 80s. Are you saying that's the era that they had higher expectations?
Well, and it's going to be. This is a conversation for us to have. Some people believe that we had. I think we had more expectations prior to desegregation.
More or higher expectations?
Higher,
more expectations or
higher.
Okay.
When I look at and this, and I know we don't have enough time to talk about it, but you could put a pin in this one, and we can do the research on it too. By the way, are we better off in terms of expectations for kids now than we were before segregation?
So Greg, you're right. We'll put a pin.
Bring that back.
But you said the research
because when you look at the historical figures that came before us, the expectations were high. They were high. Somewhere along the lines, we've become more willing to accept this as being different, as the new times, as the new era. I'm saying, and I agree with something Barron said a moment ago. If we're going to have these high expectations, or we're going to raise the expectation, we have to raise the level of support too. And that's where I want the conversation to be. What can we do, and what must we do to bring our kids back up to a higher standard?
That's going to be interesting, Greg, because if you look at the climate that we're in, and it's rolled back 60 years, right, from what we're dealing with DEI, that conversation is going to go far, far, far away. I mean, it's going to go far. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah, I'll make sure I go and do some study and research too, because Barron apparently is sitting over there with his chat AI, disputing and dispelling and throwing out all these percentages and Oprah Winfrey. But I'll be ready next time.
Well,
don't hate on my level of intellect and intelligence, Greg. That's awful, man. Because I actually take the time out to sit down and read research articles.
Man, he didn't expect you to do
that from you.
I didn't expect that from you. You actually gonna straddle me.
Times are different.
But if I did use my resources, that's the expectation. Is that if you don't know something, go look it up before you take a position on it.
And I want us to hold our young people to the same level of expectations.
But Greg, let me just say this, Greg, because I have been researching education attainment, particularly in the African American community, for many years, and that's why I'm confident in what I know the research is going to reveal. And as much as we talk about how expectations were higher before Brown versus Board of Education, which is 1954. I think we are forgetting about the number of Black people, for example, before 1954, who stopped going to school at all, and nobody even said a word. I mean, you know, my mother used to tell me, my grandmother used to tell me stories that they would come and ask her to send my mother to school more because he missed so much school being out there picking cotton. And
that's what it was. And tobacco.
And that was impacting her ability to be successful. Now, I'm not saying my grandmother just didn't care, but out of necessity, my grandmother had to do what she had to do to try and feed the family and sustain themselves. But this whole nostalgia that if we go back 60, 75 years, that there was just all these great outcomes and all these high expectations, and people weren't dropping out of school and not doing their work. That's just simply not true.
And let me ask this question. I know we're getting ready to go. Do you think they did more with less?
Absolutely. They had to. Yeah. They had to do more with less. But even though I'm saying they did more with less, Greg, I'll say.
Do you think there was an expectation for them to be able to do more with less?
Pardon me?
Was that an expectation that they would do more?
Oh, requirement. It was a requirement, right? I mean, they're required to do more.
They have no choice. I mean, so you look at 1940.
And so now they have a choice.
Wait a minute. You look at 1947 in South Carolina, Levi Pearson kids were walking 9 miles to school just to go to school. They had no choice. I mean, yeah, so they didn't want to have to walk 9 miles to school.
Now they have a choice.
They had a choice because they could go to the field.
I know we have to go. Now they have a choice. That's another good conversation to have. Choice. You know, choice.
That's what I was saying. When we do this data dive, we're gonna have some information to either look at where we are and say, do we have a choice?
Choice is a hot topic here in South Carolina.
Hey, well, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Well, look here, we coming up on the end of the segment. I appreciate the spirited conversation around expectations, and obviously all of these fine leaders here want nothing but the best for every single young person that we encounter. Until next time, you have, Brother McCoy, you have something you want to add?
Just very quickly, I want everyone, our viewing audience, to know we have opposing views, and that's the way it should be. And I just say that because I don't want people to misinterpret our opposing views as being we're not all in alignment. The reality is we're not, and we're not going to be. And so I just want to say, for those that are checking us out, because I've heard that and some of the feedback, seem like y'all are always on different pages. We are. I just want to put that out there.
Well, iron sharp as iron, bro.
We absolutely are, because look, I don't have my shirt, so there's always going to be one that's not in agreement.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining us for this last session of the executive session. Look forward to seeing you for the next episode. God bless you. Have a great day.
Provocative, insightful, empowering.
Kids don't have time for us to wait to get it together. They get one shot at school. Next year might be too late.
If you're a teacher, be courageous. If you're a school board member, be courageous. Because you know who the most courageous people in the school system? The children.
And are you going to stay true to who you are and what they've hired you to do?
The moment you think you have arrived and you don't need to do anything else, you are now falling behind, and it's time to pick the pace up.
The executive session is all about building leadership within you.
Regardless of whether you're an educator, you are a minister, a government official, or CEO of a corporation.
The executive session is the session for you.
Check us out and help us help you grow so that you too can help others.